Now we've got political analyst, the founder and director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, and one of my go-to sources for all things polling and ratings, Larry Sabato. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Happy to be with you, Brian, and congratulations on all that you do. I don't know how you get through so many things every week.
Well, thank you.
You do it. You're young and energetic.
That's it. Well, trying to cling on to what youth I have. Politics makes it tough. Okay, so let's start here. So as not to bury the lead, what kind of an impact do you think that the debate is going to have as far as polling is concerned, knowing full well that we have one of the most polarized and inelastic electorates in modern American history?
The polarization makes it almost impossible for Kamala Harris, who was the clear, overwhelming winner of the debate, to gain very much. You know, a point or two, maybe three, I'd kind of say one or two, which has been the norm recently, even for conventions. You get either zero bounce or maybe 1 or 2 points. And that's because people already know where they stand, and particularly because of Donald Trump. People have been polarized for a long time, but he has polarized people beyond any realization. I don't think we ever knew we would be quite this polarized. But what it means is, and this is really important because I have seen so much commentary since the debate saying, well, she's not going to gain very much from it. And a debate in early September isn't going to have much impact on the vote. No, the vote is already happening. It's going to accelerate with each additional week. And while people forget things quickly, they don't forget things that quickly. Right. There will be a very sizable portion, millions, who will remember something from the debate that they either liked or disliked. In most cases, like that Kamala Harris did, and dislike that Donald Trump did. So this builds on the foundation that she created at the Democratic Convention. And that foundation filled in a lot of blanks. There are plenty more to go, but there are also more than 50 days of the campaign to go.
Now, you'd mentioned a bounce of maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 points. If you look at the 4 major polling averages, Kamala Harris has now taken the lead in all of them, in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and North Carolina. But the leads that she's enjoying, especially in states like Nevada and North Carolina, in 538, for example, are 0.1%, 0.2%. In split ticket, it's 0.4 and 0.5%. For Silver Bulletin, it's 0.2 and 0.1%. So first of all, wouldn't a bounce of an entire point, of an entire 2 points, have a massive impact on the outcome of this race?
Well, it could and should, except that polling is so inaccurate that I wouldn't put too much stock even in these averages. The averages are better than most individual polls, and I never trust one poll. Even the New York Times Siena College poll, believe it or not, that is not the one poll that should be looked at necessarily. But when you've got a margin this close, all we have to do is remember both the 2000 election, the Gore-Bush election, and of course 2016, when Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes and 2 full percentage points and still didn't win. And Trump still got over 300 electoral votes. So people have a lot of work to do. They shouldn't fool themselves just because the elites, including us, say that Kamala Harris did extremely well at the convention and extremely well at the debate. That doesn't guarantee anything. They have to work hard.
Now, how much weight are you putting on these polls in terms of impacting your ratings at Crystal Ball?
We put less emphasis on the polls than we used to. Look, polls can do one of 3 things. They can either tell you that candidate A is way ahead and is going to win, or that candidate B is ahead by a solid margin and is very likely to win, or that it's too close for a poll to tell.
Right.
And this, you know, Brian, that a lot of your viewers will not know. And it's shocking. The good research on polling suggests that if you want to really estimate the margin of error, you should double the listed margin of error, because there are all kinds of sources of error that cannot be calculated and included in that traditional margin of error that accompanies every poll. So when you think about a poll that has a 3-point margin of error, well, that's plus or minus 3. And so it's really plus or minus 6. So if you've got a poll with a candidate up by a fraction of 1%, you know, not only don't take it to the bank, I wouldn't take it outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do want to point your attention to one more slate that was just released that I think has turned a lot of heads, and that is the Morning Consult polling, which is a high-rated pollster, and they're showing Kamala Harris with leads in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, tied in Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. So this is part of a broader trend that we're seeing in which the Harris campaign is gaining momentum. Do you think that these numbers remain, or do you think that the momentum, continues and Donald Trump continues to relinquish this lead that he previously enjoyed?
Well, if tens of millions of voters are rational, then I would say yes. I don't understand how anyone could watch that debate and think that Donald Trump is okay, or that he still has all of his brain functions at the age of 78, headed toward 82, and he would be older than Joe Biden is now at the end of that term. How can anyone do that? Now, let's get realistic. He's got tens of millions of votes in his pocket, and he's going to get within, 2 or 3 percentage points of winning, even if he doesn't win. So, it's hard for me to say, except I should add this to what I said earlier. It's always better to be a little ahead than a little behind,
right?
Because it does enthuse your supporters. In fact, I think being a little ahead is actually better than being ahead by quite a lot. That's when overconfidence sets in. That's
right.
When people say, well, they don't need my extra $50. That's when you say, I'm going to go to a movie tonight instead of going door to door. When it's this close, they'll put in the extra effort. They'll contribute the extra money.
I think that the danger here is any sense of complacency. And that's I always make that caveat when I talk about polling. Even if we are ahead, you act like you're 5 points behind. You'll also notice in the Morning Consult poll that Donald Trump is down 2 in Florida. Now, Florida has been trending red since 2000. Do you think that this might just be an outlier, or the polls that we're seeing now showing them close are an outlier? Or might we actually be seeing some type of realignment that suggests that Florida could be in play for Democrats?
Well, I'm not going to rule that out, because one thing I know from my historical studies over many, many decades is that if you go back to post-Civil War, or even to the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, almost every state has changed sides at least once. This happens regularly. A state, just like a human being or a family, evolves over time. Everything isn't stationary. And so it's possible. And Florida is a good example of a state that has a strong party base for both sides. That would suggest that fundamental shifts can happen with big events. So I don't rule it out. I don't think it's the probability, but it also isn't true that the probability here is 80 or 90%. I'd say, 55, 45, something like that. And over time, Florida will become more competitive, if only because they get tired of one party winning everything, and then the corruption sets in.
Yeah. Well, an Emerson poll, I believe it was, had Debbie Mukersell-Powell tied with Rick Scott. What do you think the prospect of her unseating him is? Or Democrats winning in any of these offensive races this cycle, which include Texas, Florida, and Missouri?
Oh, I think it's entirely possible. I wouldn't call it a probability, but don't we normally have at least one real shocker in the Senate? Not every single election, but most of them. There are things that can't be predicted, and the polling averages just simply can't reveal the truth in advance about all these races. So sure, it's a possibility. I don't know whether these polls are outliers or not. You only know once you see a long series of polls or you get the actual election result. But look, Rick Scott is not exactly the Jolly Green Giant of Florida politics. He won by a sliver when he first was elected governor in 2010. He won by another sliver when he was reelected in 2014. In 2018, he got that Senate seat by 10,000 votes against a friend who I think was an excellent senator and is a wonderful NASA administrator, Bill Nelson. So Florida can have very close elections. I don't know if you were around in 2000, but I was down there watching the 537 votes that elected a president of the United States.
Well, right now, Florida is engaged in door-to-door voter contact over the prospect of keeping the abortion ballot on the November ballot, the abortion referendum on the November ballot. They're doing the same thing, they tried to do the same thing in Missouri. The Missouri Supreme Court weighed in and said that against the wishes of the Secretary of State, Ashcroft, that question would remain on the ballot there. Is it true that having this referendum on the ballot of an otherwise safely red state could have such an impact that it does put at risk the Republicans keeping control of the seats there?
Yes, it could. That's the only fair answer. The problem is, of course, it's lower on the ballot. And Florida's never revised its ballots, so you don't have butterfly ballots that can do strange things. But it's further down. So you already will have voted for president, for senator, for House member. And I believe that's when the referenda are listed. The second thing is you've got a lot of pro-choice Republicans who may satisfy themselves by voting for the referendum or knowing they're going to go into the polls and do it, but still vote Republican, somehow giving Trump a pass for effectively eliminating Roe v. Wade. Again, I don't understand how people can think that way. The brain process is a little bit odd.
Yeah, it's a strong cognitive dissonance at play where you reward the person who has a position that is directly antithetical to the position that you want. You reward them with a promotion or another job while also kind of doing apologia for the actual positions that they have.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And that tells you how strong party ID is today.
Yeah.
I often say that the two most powerful, influential letters in the English language are D and R. And they're determining more and more. Now, to some degree, it may be a good thing. It's always been a symbol to people who don't know much. But this is disturbing. It's determining more elections than it should.
And I think that's such a good point. And it's why, by the way, former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, when he came onto the stage at the DNC, he didn't say that Republicans should become Democrats, because it's not going to happen. I mean, to relinquish such a big part of your identity, is the likelihood of that happening is so slim. But he did say it doesn't make you a Democrat to vote for Democrats, it makes you a patriot. And so he's appealing to another part of their identity without forcing them to relinquish something that is so closely held as whether you see yourself as a Democrat or a Republican.
No, that's absolutely true. And Duncan and Brad Raffensperger and some of the other people there have been pretty courageous. Now, they have positions that you and I might disagree with vehemently, a lot of them probably. But, it takes a special kind of courage to stand up against your party and maybe end your career, as my appointee here at the Center for Politics, our professor of practice, Liz Cheney, did. It's not easy to end your career, to give up everything you worked for years. It isn't. Yeah. And so you have to admire that, even if you disagree with them on every other issue.
Right. We had spoken about the offensive races, Texas, Florida, Missouri. One defensive race for Democrats that's worrisome is obviously Montana. I believe the only poll that we have is an AARP poll showing Tester down by 6 points. Can you speak on Democratic prospects at retaining that seat? How do you feel about Democrats hanging on to Montana?
Montanans used to be so independent. And the independents actually led them to the Democrats more than the Republicans. I'm so old, I remember when the Democrats could regularly control the governorship and both U.S. Senate seats. Well, that era is gone. And there are so many rock-ribbed Republicans living in Montana now. Some of them come here from other states, escaping California, I hear, is a big thing there. That it's going to be really tough for Tester. He's never had a race like this. Maybe it's a miracle that he's been in the Senate for 18 years. He got 3 terms under difficult conditions. Maybe he can do it for a 4th, but the polls, the surveys, and even the soundings outside polling are not encouraging right now.
We've seen Texas's margin at the presidential level shrink for Republicans virtually every year since 2000. They used to enjoy around 60% support. Now it's down to 52%. Do you think, based on these trends, first of all, that it's an inevitability that Texas flips blue? And if so, when do you think that will happen?
Well, when you say flip blue, it suggests that you're saying Texas is going to go back to being heavily Democratic. And that's an impossibility. To me, it's not turning blue, it's turning purple. And it's going to take a while for that process to work its way through. Now, when voting purple means that in some elections it's going to vote Democratic, whether it's for president or senator or other statewide offices. And look, after a while, as I was saying earlier, the corruption sets in. And what's happening in Texas? Corruption,
Right.
corruption.
Right. We're seeing their attorney general face impeachment and prosecution. We've seen the power grid fail numerous times over and over because this is what happens with one party rule in a state that does value corruption.
That's exactly right. So when is it going to happen? Of course, I don't know. I always say to people who ask me, it's going to happen in 2050 because I know for sure I'll be long dead and nobody will remember I said it. But it will take a while. Now, an upset is not completely ruled out in the Texas Senate race. Ted Cruz has accumulated an amazing number of enemies, even on the conservative side of things. They just don't like him very much. And sooner or later, that hurts you. Although, again, people can survive a long time based on their letter, the letter that goes next to their name.
Larry, where can people see and hear more from you?
Oh, well, they could come to Charlottesville. But don't come if you have any affiliation with the neo-Nazis, please. We've already been through that.
Yeah.
If you're broad-minded, we would welcome you at any time. But the Center for Politics has a political outlet that's free, the Crystal Ball. You can just Google Sabato's Crystal Ball or just Crystal Ball. It will pop up. Give us an email, any email. It can be a junk email. We never give out or sell the email addresses. And twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, you'll get our latest newsletter in which great analysts like Kyle Condit and Miles Coleman will put together some interesting facets of the elections you probably haven't thought much about, but which will enrich your cocktail party chatter.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you and everybody on your team does. And again, for everybody watching right now, please make sure to give Larry and his team a follow. And Larry, thank you so much for taking the time today.
And Brian, thank you and congratulations on all you do and keep it up. You've got a long time horizon. We're depending on you.
Thank you.